Fire Mage makes huge explosions, we're throwing phoenixes at our enemies and crazy stuff like that. It's an amazing spec. I'm going to show you everything today in a really beginner-friendly format, but I'm also going to show you everything in a good amount of detail for those veterans watching too. We're going to jump straight into it then, starting with the stat priority. Of course, intellect is going to be our main stat. And we're just going to get a higher and higher eye level or item level of gear to get more intellect. We'll put the secondary stat priority here. However, I would say that you should always just prioritize getting a higher eye level of gear. And that's generally always going to be an upgrade and not to worry too much about the secondary stats. I do advise that you simulate your character if you know how and you care enough if you're looking at min-maxing at that higher level, however. If you don't know how to do that and you're a beginner, honestly, I wouldn't really worry about it. Just get a higher eye level of gear. Looking at the secondary stats, haste will actually increase your attack and spell casting speed. So like if we cast fireball here, you can see it takes, X amount of seconds. The more haste we have, the quicker that will cast. We have versatility, which is going to simply increase your damage done, increase any healing done, and also reduce damage taken. It's a really good all-round stat. So we've got critical strike, meaning you have a chance to do more damage. Then we have our mastery, which is called ignite. This is different for every spec. And again, for us fire mages, it's ignite. Your target burns for an additional amount of damage over 9 seconds of the damage dealt by our main fire spells. If we do some fire damage to them, you can see they have ignite damage then applied to them, which is a dot or damage over time. The more mastery we have, the more fire damage ignite will do. Fire blast will actually cause our ignites to also spread to nearby enemies. So if I use fireball here and then I use fire blast, you can then see it's then spread to the other target dummy as well. I will be going through the entire rotation and the spells we have, etc. in full detail later in this video, by the way. I'm going to take a quick look at our set bonus for this season as well. And again, if you don't know what any of these spells are, I will be covering them all fully shortly. So the 2 set bonus, Phoenix Flames damage is increased, and the amount is increased by 25% on its primary target. And our 4 set, after dealing damage, Phoenix Flames has a 10% chance to return to you, refunding a percentage of the cooldown on the Phoenix Flames and granting us some extra spell damage for 10 seconds. Phoenix Flames is this spell here where we're literally launching phoenixes at our target. More on how that works shortly, but that is what our set bonus revolves around this season. So now we're going to look at the utilities and some of the defensives, etc. that we have available to us as a mage. Now I am specifically saying mage here because these are not specialization utilities. These are actually available to you no matter which spec, Frostfire or Arcane, you are going with as a mage in the War Within. So if you would like to try out some other classes, which I have done guides for, then feel free. You won't have to relearn all of this part of the video. So on the left here, we have things that are more affecting other people, so our enemies. And on the right-hand side, we've got some really useful abilities that are actually enhancing us and our allies. Now, there are a lot more utilities that I could go through, but I don't want to overwhelm you as this is a beginner video, and these are the core and important ones I think you should know about. When you're more comfortable with your specialization, I would recommend going through the spellbook here and just seeing what's what. The same would be with the mage talent tree on the left of your talents. So then, starting off, we have Polymorph. This is going to transform your enemy into a sheep, incapacitating them for an entire minute, and they cannot take any actions. They will regenerate any health that they have, so if you've got them down to 10% health, it's probably not the best time to polymorph them, but it will take them out of the action for a while so that you can focus on any, friends that they may have lying around. We also have Frost Nova here, which when I use, you can see, has encased my enemies in ice, freezing them in place for 6 seconds, but damage may interrupt that freeze effect. We also have Slow, which you can see I've put on this enemy here, reduces the target's movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds. We've also got Ring of Frost, which is placeable, so I can place it here, as you can see. Summoning a Ring of Frost for 10 seconds at that location. Enemies entering it are incapacitated for 10 seconds. When the incapacitate expires, they're then slowed by 65% for 4 seconds. So it completely stops them in their tracks, and then it slows them a bit after. And lastly, we have Counter Spell. This simply will kick, otherwise known as interrupt, the enemy's spell casting. So if they're casting a spell, you can interrupt that. And that is really, really important if you're doing PvP or things like Mythic Plus. Not as important in raiding. Still might be if there's certain ads, etc. in the fights, but generally it's more used in kind of Mythic Plus, leveling, questing, and PvP. So going on to the other side then, we've got Ice Block, where you actually incapacitate yourself into a block of ice, but prevents all damage being done onto you. Now, you cannot actually use this again for 30 seconds. You'll have a debuff, as you can see up here, Hypothermia. We have Mass Barrier, casting Prismatic Barrier on yourself and allies for how long for? Quite a long time, a whole minute. As you can see up here, Prismatic Barrier absorbs damage, magic damage taken reduced by 25%, duration of all harmful magic effects on you are reduced, and avoidance is increased by 5%. So avoidance here is another stat that we didn't go through in the stat priorities because we only have it sometimes. Reduces damage taken from area of effect attacks, or AoE, by 5%. We then have Greater Invisibility, making you invisible and untargetable for 20 seconds, removing all threat, and any action will cancel the effect. You take 60% reduced damage while invisible. We then have two abilities which we can actually massively impact our allies. Arcane Intellect, one of my favourites. Up here we can see Intellect is increased by 5%. This is the primary stat that we use as mages. And when you use this, it will actually go on you, any party members, and any raid members that you are in a group with. And you can target people in the wild and also give it to them as well. Lastly, we have Time Warp. This is otherwise known as Bloodlust or Heroism, increasing the haste of all party and raid members by 30% for 40 seconds, so you're going to cast your spells a lot quicker. And this is the de facto biggest cooldown in the game. Generally, your raid leader or group leader will call out when to use this. And you can see here, you now have temporal displacement. You cannot benefit from Time Warp or other similar effects for 10 minutes. And this is going to be the same if a shaman uses Bloodlust, if an evoker uses, is it Fury of the Aspects? I can't remember what it's called. If anyone uses a similar effect, you will all have that 10-minute cooldown. So whether a mage uses it or a shaman uses it in your group, you all are affected by the cooldown. What I'm trying to say is, if you've used it, a shaman cannot then use Bloodlust and use their one. It literally affects the whole group. Now, as I said, there are more in your spell book that you should probably look through. But again, don't overwhelm yourself. First, let's learn how we're going to play the spec. These are the general and most important ones that you are going to be using in the War Within. Now we go into the really exciting bit, which is, of course, the rotation. For Fire Mage, we are going with Sunfury, which just feels right. Now, it's not just because that's mainly very fiery, but it actually is just the best hero talent to go for. And that is to be both in Mythic Plus and Raid. And in fact, it's actually the same talent tree we're going for in Mythic Plus and Raid. Because of how it works, we can basically use the same rotation in both Mythic Plus and raiding, and therefore single target and AoE, which is very rare that happens, but it is here happening right now before our eyes. So, ta-da, here is the rotation. So this is our main cooldown called Combustion. And this top priority list, which is very similar to the bottom one, this is your in combustion priority and your outside of combustion priority. So first, let's do a what, when, why. What spells do we have? When are we using them? Why are we using them? So we've got Combustion, engulfing us in flames for 13 seconds, increasing our spell critical chance to 100% and granting you mastery equal to 75% of your crit strike stat. You can cast it while casting other spells, by the way. When you activate Combustion, you gain 2% critical damage, and up to 4 nearby allies will also get some crit strike as well. We've got Pyroblast, which is like an immense fireball, and you can see it takes a very long time to cast. We've got Scorch, scorching an enemy for fire damage. Scorch is guaranteed to critical strike and increases your movement speed for a few seconds when cast on a target that's below 30% health. And you'll notice you can use it while moving. We then have Fire Blast. Blasts the enemy for fire damage, castable while casting other spells, and always deals a critical strike. Phoenix Flames, you basically send a phoenix at your enemies, always does a critical strike. It's got maximum 3 charges. And Fireball, where you do a fireball. Each time your fireball fails to critically strike a target, it gains a stacking 10% increased crit chance, and that ends when you finally do a crit with your fireball. So before we get into it any further, the main thing that we actually need to know about is something called, in fact, I'm going to show it to you in the spell book because it'd be easier, is Hot Streak. Getting 2 direct damage critical strikes in a row with fire spells will make your next Pyroblast instant and deal double the normal ignite damage. If you've forgotten, ignite is our mastery damage, where your target gets a debuff of an extra dot damage over time of fire. So when we get, basically what's going to happen with Hot Streak is when you get a critical strike, let's actually do it. You'll see on my buffs here, I've got Heating Up, which means I've got 1 out of 2 critical strikes. I've scored a critical strike. A second spell will make it a instant cast on my Pyroblast. So if I get Heating Up and then get another crit, I now have Hot Streak, which shows here that my Pyroblast is now instant. Okay, so you get 1 crit, it's Heating Up, 2 crits, Hot Streak, and Pyroblast will be instant. And that kind of is one of the main things that we need to be aware of in this rotation. So what is our priority? Well, first, let's go through the cooldown priority. You do want to use your combustion on cooldown, of course. So let's say we press combustion and we've gone into, flames everywhere. And look at this beautiful Phoenix from the hero talents. Isn't it amazing? Oh my God, I really can't wait for launch. I need it now. I can't wait. I'm filming this like a day before launch. And I'm very excited, if you can't tell. But anyway, so we're going to cast Pyroblast instantly with a Hot Streak. That is our #1 priority in combustion, okay? If you've got a Hot Streak, use Pyroblast. Otherwise, cast Scorch to maintain something called Improved Scorch. And that is here. Casting Scorch on targets below 30% health increases the target's damage taken from you, and it can stack twice. So we're only using Scorch here if the target is at 30% health or lower, basically. If the target's at 30% health, then our second priority is Scorch. After that, let's say we've got Heating Up, meaning we've got a critical strike. Our next priority would be Fire Blast. Because it always deals a critical strike, meaning we can go, okay, we've got Heating Up, we're halfway there, and then we can use Fire Blast to guarantee we get Hot Streak and then go back to use our Pyroblast. After that, if we're going to use Phoenix Flames, if we have something called Phoenix Reborn, or to not cap with our stacks of Phoenix Flames. So Phoenix Reborn is down here. When your direct damage spells hit an enemy, 25 times the damage of your next 2 Phoenix Flames is increased by 100%, and they refund a charge on use. So if you have that, and you have Heating Up, I would then use it. So Fire Blast is the priority. If not, use Phoenix Flames basically and try not to cap out on it. After that, you can see we actually have Scorch here again on the priority list. This is if you get a different buff, and that is from here, Heat Shimmer. Damage from your Ignite, which again is your mastery, has a 5% chance to make your next Scorch have no cast time and deal damage as though the target was below 30% health. So even if it's not, and that's a chance to proc from your Ignite damage from your mastery. And then if we've got nothing else to press in the combustion window, we're just going to press Phoenix Flames. And then if nothing else, if that's got no stacks left, then Scorch. So we're going to go into combustion, and we're going to get up our instant Pyroblasts here. And there is a free Scorch that's going to deal damage as if they were under 30% health there. So again, we're going to be getting up our Hot Streaks. You can see we're going to get them very quickly because when you're in combustion, you are guaranteeing crits as well. So you're pretty much going to, use these two spells where you can to get those hot streaks on your Pyroblast. And then if you've got no thingies on them, oh, look, there we go. That's going to act as if the target is under 30%. And now we've got an instant Pyroblast. And we're kind of just rotating like that. It's actually a really nice and quite a straightforward rotation. It has gotten simpler in the War Within now that we're not prioritizing something called Sun King's Blessing, if you are aware of Fire Mage already. When we're outside of our combustion priority, we're actually going to, one, use shifting power, and that's going to be after something called hyperthermia. So that's down here. While combustion is not active, consuming hot streak, so when you're not in your combustion window, consuming a hot streak has a low chance to cause all Pyroblasts to have no cast time and be guaranteed to crit for 6 seconds. If that procs, you're basically just going to keep pressing Pyroblast. Just keep doing instant Pyroblasts. It's amazing. So if you see your Pyroblast proc like that, then you're going to do it. After you have hyperthermia, you'll use shifting power. So after you get your 6 seconds of free Pyroblasts, use shifting power. This is going to do arcane damage. And basically your mage cooldowns are going to be reduced after you use that. And therefore that can help get rid of your combustion's cooldown. So looking at the normal rotation outside of combustion, if we have less than one charge of Phoenix Flames and we have Hot Streak, we can use Fireball. After that, we're going to use Pyroblast with Hot Streak. Again, we're going to use Scorch here to maintain the improved Scorch, same as sort of here, basically where it's saying, are they under 30% health? And then after that, it's pretty much going to be the same thing for the remaining spells as it is here, where Scorch here is being used if the target is under 30% health, and if they're not under 30% health, then just use Fireball instead. So just to go through it one more time, so we know that we fully understand it, we're going to be using, in Combustion, instant Pyroblasts, Scorch to maintain improved Scorch if they're under 30% health, using our Fire Blast and Phoenix Flames pretty much to get our Hot Streaks, using Scorch if we have Heat Shimmer, using Phoenix Flames, and then just using Scorch if we've got nothing else to press. Outside of Combustion, it's going to be using Fireball if we have less than one stack of Phoenix Flames and a Hot Streak is up. This is actually something known as pooling. Hot Streaks of Pyroblasts, Scorch to keep up again, improved Scorch if they're under 30% health, using our Fire Blast, our Scorch of Heat Shimmer if it's up, Phoenix Flames, Scorch if they're under 30% health, and then Fireball as a filler if you get down that far. And that is pretty much the rotation for Fire Mage in the War Within. And we can use this absolutely the same in both Mythic Plus and Raiding for single target. And now we can look through the Sunfury talents and what they're doing in a little bit more detail. So for this build, we are going with Sunfury. It fits really nicely into Fire Mage, and it's one of my favourites. So to start off then, we're going to get Spellfire Spheres. Every 6 times you consume a Hot Streak, you conjure a Spellfire Sphere. And when you're out of combat, this is actually going to slowly regenerate as well. Basically, what these spheres do is they just increase your spell damage. Going down the left side, consuming a Hot Streak grants you some haste. It can stack 10 times. So some more passive haste. Merely a setback, your Blazing Barrier now grants some avoidance while active and some leech when it expires or breaks. Better defensives. Then we've got an option, Savor the Moment or Sunfury Execution. I like Sunfury Execution here. Scorch's critical strike threshold is increased to 35%, so it's upping that execution phase. Scorch, well, we know what Scorch does. So has it actually changed Scorch in here? No, it's all good. Invocation, Arcane Phoenix. So as well as getting these spheres, we also have an actual Phoenix that we're going to get. When you cast Combustion, summon an Arcane Phoenix to aid you in battle. So whenever we go into Combust, whenever we cast it, we are going to get a Phoenix. And that is going to basically fire automatically spells for you. It's a little cute minion to help you. You know, it's going to be firing off some spells. Lessons in Deliberation. Arcane Phoenix will spell steal when it is summoned and when it expires. Codex of the Sunstriders. Over its duration, your Arcane Phoenix will consume each of your Spellfire Spheres to cast an exceptional spell. So remember, we're making these spheres when we consume our hot streak. Well, over the duration, the Arcane Phoenix is going to consume those spheres. And upon consuming a Spellfire Sphere, your Arcane Phoenix will grant you Lingering Embers, increasing spell damage as well. Burden of Power, conjuring a Spellfire Sphere, increases the damage of your next Pyroblast or your next Flame Strike, depending if you're in AoE or single target. So cool, some more passive damage increase there. Glorious Incandescence, consuming Burden of Power causes your next Fire Blast to call down a storm of meteorites on the target. Cool. Last choice node here, Ignite the Future, generating a sphere while the Phoenix is active causes it to cast again another exceptional spell. And lastly, Memory of Allah. While under the effects of a casted combustion, you gain twice as many stacks of mana addiction. When your Arcane Phoenix expires, it empowers you, granting hypothermia, plus an additional 0.5 seconds for every exceptional spell that the Phoenix had cast. And Pyroblast and Flame Strike have no cast time and a guaranteed to crit. That is when you have hypothermia. So that's going to happen when your Phoenix expires. It's all going to happen passively. If you're like, oh my god, these hero talents are overwhelming me, don't worry. Again, these are all passives that are going to be happening in the rotation that you have been shown in this video anyway. This is just kind of adding to the why that we are, why we are doing the rotation in the way that we are doing it. Looking finally at the consumables and enchants, etc. we're going to use as a mage in the War Within, a few things have changed. So Nerubian Gem Weavers, these are the sockets you can add to your gear, which are coming from the weekly vault. And we can add these to our head, wrist, and waist. You can also now add 2 sockets to your neck and both rings with the magnificent jeweler's settings in the War Within. So 2 on the neck, 2 on each ring. Now let's look at the enchants. Winged Grace gives avoidance and reduces fall damage. Crystalline Radiance gives primary stats, so intellect. Chant of Armored Avoidance is avoidance. Sunset Spellthread gives intellect and stamina. Defender's March increases your stamina. You can go for Scout's March, I think it's called, which increases your speed instead, but a bit squishy. I like to go for Defender's March. Haste on both enchants for the rings, unless you're using a different secondary stat, depending on maybe your simming your character, etc. And then the Authority of Radiant Power, where basically you have a chance when doing damage to cause a massive amount of damage on your target and also increase your primary stat. Then looking at the consumables, you can go for the Flask of Alchemical Chaos. I prefer the Tempered Versatility one because it's giving versatility, meaning we're adding damage but also reducing damage, and it's a pretty nice, kind of overall flask, same as what we were using in the previous expansion. And then we can go for the Feast of Midnight Masquerade for intellect. Tempered Potion. What this does is it will actually give you all the other secondary stats that you don't get from your flask, which I think is pretty neat. Healing Potion is called an Algari Healing Potion in this expansion, which is the War Within. Algari Mana Oil, which is nice. They are adding back Mana Oil, increases critical strike and haste. Crystallized Augment Rune to add intellect if you are using Augment Runes. And then the Blasphemite is really interesting. You can see here we're using different gems. So the Blasphemite increases primary stat, and it also increases your critical effect of your crits by 0.15% per different color gem used. Meaning if we use an Onyx, Sapphire, Emerald, and Ruby, then we're going to get 0.60% increased effect. Whereas if we only used all of one color, we'd only get 15%. So you want to kind of use these 4 different colors to get more effect from your Blasphemite. After that, I would say to use the colored gems. If you've got more than four gem slots, I would say to simulate your character, maybe look at your stat priority and see kind of what you need the most at that point for your character, because it could be different depending on the gear levels you have at that point. Thank you so much for watching this guide. I hope it was really useful for you in the War Within Season 1, whether it was for Mythic Plus or raiding. If you do have any questions, I'll be happy to help. My Patreon is in the description below, and that is where you can find my LVUI profiles, which I'll show you in a second. And also, I'm putting together a huge macro list for every single spec that's going to be really useful for you in the War Within as well. I am doing all classes and specs for the War Within, so if you are new to the channel, then please do click this playlist here to check out what else I have, which is all of them. There will also be PvP guides on this channel as well for War Within Season 1, so make sure to look out for that. This here is the UI that I was referring to. As you can see, we've got target frames, etc., left and right, and raid frames go in the middle here, and then weak auras in the middle with an action bar down here. Chat is behind where my camera is. Minimap and details, etc., are here on the right. All of the plater profiles, the voodoo, the LVY, etc., details profile has all been made by me. And again, you can get this on my Patreon should you like it.